Hello viewers, today we're going to be performing the yearly deep cleaning of the pellet stove. This is a Napoleon pellet stove. It's a Napoleon NPS40 pellet stove. I believe this one was made in the year 2000, so this is probably the 23rd or 24th heating season for this stove. These are very good stoves. They are made in Canada. And although they are getting old, they seem to be holding their value pretty well, and many of them continue to operate to this day, this one included. So what we're going to do is we're going to dismantle both of the side panels. We're going to check the blowers to make sure that they're clean, and we'll clean the internal air chambers. I've already cleaned the chimney from top to bottom, so the chimney is good to go, but we do need to clean from here in, so we'll do that. I've already done a standard routine cleaning of the inside, which did yield some concerns. I noticed that the heat exchanger has developed a fair bit of rust over the summer, as well as some other parts of the stove. So I think what I'm going to do next year is I'm going to cover the chimney. I don't know if you can see it too well in terms of lighting, but there's a fair bit of rust on, it's just surface rust on the heat exchanger. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it on and put it up all the way and let it get real hot for a while and see if the rust kind of goes away. If not, I'll just take some steel wool to it and that should clean it off. It was a very humid July, and so I suspect that the moisture coming down from the outside just caused it to rust. So next year I'll just take like a wrap-up bag or something around the top of it, and that should alleviate that problem. I could also just leave it open. That might even make more sense. It's just kind of leave it open like that, just so that the airflow can go through there. This is only we're going into the second full year with heating with the pellet stove here. So while I have become very well versed in it, I certainly don't know everything there is to know about how these things should sit over the summer and so forth. We're still in experimental stages as far as that's concerned. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and start taking this apart and see what we've got inside. We're going to begin by removing the side panels. On this side, we're going to see the heat exchanger blower that I replaced last year, not because it broke, but because I wanted a more powerful one. I believe the original one had a 1750 RPM motor, and I put in a 3000 RPM motor, so we get some more power out of it, which has been helpful. I noticed a significant difference when you're running it at full draw. So I suspect, I hope, that the bearings are still good on that. Most likely we'll have some dust built up. We'll clean that off, and then that's pretty much all we're going to do on this side. Locate that screw that fell. A screw went somewhere over here. There it is, all the way back by the wall. Okay, so this is attached inside here. We're going to leave that alone. We've got a couple components here. We have this is all that there is in terms of electronics. These are our timing mechanisms, I believe. We have a rheostat on here. We have a neon indicator light on here, and we have a potentiometer on here for the variable speed fan. I would like to buy replacement boxes of these, as long as they're not outrageously priced. I'd like to buy a replacement rheostat, and I'd like to buy a set of snap discs. So there exists, I believe, what you call a catch-22 scenario here in regards to replacing components. So most of the components in this stove are original. They're made in Canada, they're of good quality build, they're older, and generally apt to be much more reliable than any of the replacement ones you might buy today. However, even the best quality components have a finite lifespan, and so while these components might be more reliable over time, or have been more reliable over time, at some point they're going to fail. So the question is, do we replace certain components before they spoil in hopes to maintain more reliable operation, or do we just leave it alone? We can replace the components, and we might find out that the replacement ones don't work as well, or are defective and fail in a couple of weeks, or we might find that the bearings wear out in a year or two, whereas the old ones used to last 5 or 10 years, etc., things like that. Or we could keep going with what we have, and it might last 25, 30, 35 years, but then it breaks when it's 15 degrees out and you have no heat. I typically operate under the theory of, if it's working, just leave it alone. And so that's what we're going to do. But to supplement that, I do like to have everything on hand so that if something does go out, we can get it going again. One of the reasons why I like this stove is that, being of older design, it's fairly simple. The circuitry is easy to trace and understand. There's not a lot of electronics in there to spoil. It's mostly just mechanics that are fairly quickly and easily replaced. I did replace this draft inducer motor last year because the bearings got noisy. The replacement motor is allegedly a Fasco motor as well, but instead of being made in Canada, it's now made in China. Certainly, Fasco could have the motors built in China to the same spec that they were built in Canada, but unfortunately that usually doesn't happen. So I would not be surprised if we turn this motor on this year and the bearings are audible. And if that's the case, I'll just replace it again. But that would be the scenario where the original motor lasted 20 plus years before having a problem, and then the replacement lasted 1, and then it has a problem. I kept the original motor as a backup because if these go down, this motor goes down and the other one goes down, it's a 10-minute at most replacement. Very easy to do. I have had only one breakdown on this stove since I've owned it, and that was last year in regards to the igniter. A snap disc spoiled. The snap disc that controls the igniter, and the snap disc failed shut. And so what happened was the igniter, actually I don't remember how the logic worked in regards to did it fail open or shut, but what happened was, whatever the logic was, it failed in the way that the igniter stayed on continuously, and it eventually just melted and failed. So I replaced that snap disc and I replaced the igniter. Both were pretty easy to do. Had it up and running within, I think it was less than half an hour. So we've got a new igniter in there and a new snap disc. I believe that snap disc was, I think it was this one here. This one is a safety, so if it gets too hot, it would turn the stove off. This one, when it reaches a certain temperature, it turns the igniter off. And I think there's one more safety on the other side. But I'd like to get those on hand and have all three of those, but they're not expensive. They're easy, cheap insurance to have those parts easy to change out. So this is all unscrewed now. Just disconnect this. This component here is a vacuum switch. So if this motor was to fail and is no longer extracting the CO2, this switch here would turn it off. I don't know if this actually works because I've never tested it without the motor. I suppose I probably should, but we're not going to do that today. Let's see if this is noisy. Yep, I can hear the bearings already. Lovely. So, point proven. Keep the old ones in there for as long as you can. I could replace the bearings on this, but I just don't feel like it's worth the time. The problem with this is that this is kind of poorly designed. The motor should be further back with a longer shaft because this fan is moving the air that's passed over the flame. It's very hot air, and so the whole thing just runs super hot. It's Class B, so it can handle it. The windings can handle it, but inevitably the bearings start to degrade. So this is a little bit dirty. It's got some ash caked on there, so we'll clean that off. Now we got to go in here. I'm going to go grab a drop light so we can see this a little better. Much better. So we're going to come over here and we're going to detach the cleanout from the bottom of the pipe. And so we've cleaned from here up. We're going to clean from here over. I've got a brush on a flexible thing here. It's long enough to go that way, long enough to go that way. And I've got the ash vacuum, which is not set up. Give me a minute to plug this in here. And none of this here is an act of precision or perfection because within a week it's going to be filthy again. The point is to clean out any major buildup that might reduce airflow, and even that really probably takes several years to get to. But let's get started here before it gets too dark. Oh, that's why it's dark. The lights aren't even on. There we go. Okay. This is the loudest vacuum I've ever used, so lower the volume on the video or take your headphones off if you're using headphones. It's all clean in there now. So I'll go ahead and move over to the front, and we'll try to get the ducts cleaned out in the front. I suppose I should have done this first, because now all this dust is going to go back down to where we were just cleaning.
Okay, now we're going to go back to where we were before.
I just went to the other side and vacuumed up some of that pellet dust that was sitting on the side. So now we're going to clean off the fan, which fairly simple. We'll just take the brush to it real quick. Along with the vacuum so we don't make too much of a mess in here. And this is another one of those things you can go at this thing for hours and get it looking like it's brand new. There's just no point because within 2 hours of operation it's going to look like that again. Alright, so now everything is clean in here. There is a lot of surface rust in here, so I definitely think that we need to do something different for the summer next year. So the gasket I was able to get off in good condition, so we'll put it back. If it tears or whatever, you would need to replace it. But this is good enough to reuse. Looks like there is some accumulations behind the blade, but as long as it's not going to hit anything, which it's not, you know, make some kind of annoying clicking sound or something, I'm just going to leave it be. And we'll have to see how loud this motor is once it's running at full speed. If I can already hear the bearings just spinning it up by hand, I don't have a good feeling about how it's going to sound when it's running at 3,000 RPM. But you can see how easily it goes on and off. If we have to replace it, we'll replace it. It's just not cheap. I think these motors typically run around $100 a piece. That's the wrong size nut, or not, the wrong size driver. Interesting how this thing was able to take them off, but it won't put it back on. How the heck did it take them off then? It's kind of bizarre. That's the right size. This is just a basic shaded pole motor. It's not polarity sensitive. Okay, that's all back in place and cleaned. Need to put the clean out back on the pipe. There we go. Nope, not quite. Did it again. Two. There, 2 snaps. All right, so now we'll go back to the other side. Something weird on the camera there. Okay. Let's go back to the other. Actually, we can put this. We can put the door back on over here and just be done with this side completely. For some reason we have different screws here. 2 of them are, well, looks like the original screws, and then 2 of them are these sheet metal screws. These screws are awful. I can see why they were replaced. I should really just replace these 2 so I don't have to be irritated by this every year. Well, there were 4. Here's the 4th. I think this one's stripped, so it's kind of yeah, the hole has become too big, so we need a bigger screw here. We'll just put it there as a placeholder. Alright, back to the other side. Other than sitting here and scraping all this little bits of rust off of each individual blade, which I don't really have an inclination to do, the blower wheel is pretty clean. I do clean this wheel periodically throughout the season because it does get very dusty. We'll just go quick clean out with this. It's not really doing too much because there's not much on there. The bearings, oh, I can hear the bearings on this too. Unreal. Yep, we might need to replace both of these blowers. We'll have to see how loud they are. When I replaced the original blower, there was 0 bearing noise. Whatever, this is what you get. Cheap junk nowadays. that's pretty much all that we're going to do inside there. I have already done a routine cleaning on the stove, so we went into the burn area and cleaned out the we cleaned the heat exchanger, we cleaned the ashtray, cleaned the burn pit, so everything's good inside there. And this is just a indicator of where this sits. Stick this back on here. This is really just kind of cosmetic, but put that back in place. Everything on this stove is all manual. This is the damper. We usually run it around 4. Put that back where it was. Okay. So that's pretty much it. I don't like the rust that's being seen inside here. It did not look like this at the end of the year, so this is definitely from sitting over the summer. I think next year I'm going to leave the door open and maybe I'll cover the top of the chimney. If this rust does not go away after a couple burns, I will come in here with a steel wool and scrape it off, because it appears to be only surface rust. Everything else, you know, it is what it is. It's as clean as it normally gets during a routine cleanup. And you know, sure, you could make it cleaner in here, but there's no point, because the second you run it, it's going to be just as bad in no time at all. So that's it. As far as I'm concerned, this is ready for testing. Likely ready for normal operation. Everything checks out okay. Other than the bearings and the fan motors, I really don't expect any problems.